You're about to meet a man who's been accused of being the most famous rock star in American history. For over a decade, the internet has refused to let him just be a pastor. His name is Bob Joyce, and he leads a congregation in Benton, Arkansas. But according to millions of people online, he's actually Elvis Presley living under a false identity. This is Internet Mythbusters, where we trace viral claims back to their source and separate fact from fiction. Today, the Elvis pastor conspiracy. In 2011, a video surfaced of a white-haired pastor with a distinctive pompadour singing gospel music in an Arkansas church. His voice sounded eerily familiar to millions. Comments exploded. "That's Elvis. The king lives. He faked his death and found God." Within weeks, the video had been viewed millions of times across platforms. And here's what makes this conspiracy different from most. It just won't die. Nearly 15 years later, new videos are still going viral making the same claim. So let's investigate. Is there any chance at all, that the king of rock and roll is secretly preaching in Arkansas? Spoiler, no. But the reason people believe it is actually interesting. To understand why this theory exists, we need to go back to August 16, 1977. That's the day Elvis Presley was found dead at Graceland, his Memphis mansion. He was 42 years old. The official cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia, likely related to prescription drug use. His body was viewed by thousands of mourners before burial at Graceland. But almost immediately, conspiracy theories began circulating. The name on his grave was misspelled Aaron instead of Aaron. His father reportedly said, "My son is not in that grave." Some claimed the body looked like a wax figure. These theories have persisted for nearly 50 years. Elvis sightings became a cultural phenomenon, with tabloids regularly publishing claimed encounters with the supposedly living king. This is the context into which Bob Joyce entered completely unknowingly in 2011. He was just a pastor, doing what he'd done for decades, leading worship and singing gospel music. Someone recorded one of his performances and uploaded it to YouTube. The video showed an older white man with a distinctive pompadour hairstyle, singing with a deep, resonant voice that carried distinct Southern gospel inflections. The internet did what the internet does. People found physical similarities, the pompadour, the face shape, the way he moved. They analyzed his voice and declared it identical to Elvis's later recordings. And crucially, Joyce does look somewhat like what an aged Elvis might look like. He has that unmistakable pompadour, that square jaw, those heavy-lidded eyes. The resemblance, while not perfect, is striking enough to catch your attention. Here's the first problem with this theory, and it's a big one. Bob Joyce was born in 1954. That's verified by birth records. Elvis was born in 1935, a 19-year age difference. If Elvis were alive today in 2026, he'd be 91 years old. Bob Joyce, based on his birth certificate, would be 72. That's not a small discrepancy. That's nearly 2 decades. Conspiracy theorists have responses to this, of course. The birth certificate is fake. Elvis had access to government connections who could forge documents. These claims have no evidence supporting them. But here's what makes his case particularly interesting. Bob Joyce himself has directly addressed the conspiracy. He hasn't stayed silent. He's explicitly denied being Elvis multiple times on the record. In one interview, Joyce said something remarkable. Quote, "My voice is God using Elvis's voice to minister to broken hearts." He acknowledges the similarity but explains it as divine purpose, not hidden identity. That's a fascinating response. He's not angrily denying it or acting suspicious. He's reframing the coincidence through his faith, suggesting that God gave him a similar voice for ministry purposes. But for true believers in the conspiracy, his denial is just more evidence. Of course he'd deny it. He has to protect his new life. This is a classic feature of unfalsifiable conspiracy thinking. When evidence against a theory is interpreted as evidence for it, you've entered unfalsifiable territory. No amount of proof can change the believer's mind because they built escape hatches into their logic. This brings us to a psychological concept that explains why people see Elvis in Bob Joyce, pareidolia. It's our brain's tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random stimuli. Pareidolia is why we see faces in clouds, in electrical outlets, in toast. It's an evolutionary adaptation. Recognizing faces quickly was survival critical for our ancestors. But pareidolia can also mislead us. When we really want to see something, our brains become extremely good at finding it, even when it's not actually there. It's pattern recognition working overtime. Voice analysis works similarly. When you're primed to hear Elvis and Bob Joyce's singing, your brain actively filters for similarities and dismisses differences. This is confirmation bias in action. Confirmation bias leads us to seek information that supports what we already believe, while ignoring or dismissing contradictory evidence. It's one of the most powerful cognitive biases humans have. The Elvis Joyce theory resurged dramatically in late 2025 and early 2026. New videos began circulating on TikTok and YouTube, introducing the conspiracy to an entirely new generation who'd never heard of it. This cyclical nature is common with internet conspiracy theories. They never fully die. They just go dormant until a new platform or new audience rediscovers them. Then the cycle begins again. According to one analysis, the theory has been debunked at least a dozen times since 2011. Each debunking seems to have no lasting effect on the theory's spread or the conviction of its believers. This resistance to debunking is itself worth examining. Why do some beliefs persist despite overwhelming counter-evidence? The answer lies in how conspiracy theories function psychologically. Celebrity death conspiracies specifically tap into grief and denial. When a beloved figure dies unexpectedly, the fantasy that they secretly escaped to live a peaceful life offers comfort. Elvis was more than a musician. He was a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of youth and rebellion who represented an entire era. His death at 42 felt premature, wrong, somehow unfinished. The Bob Joyce theory offers a beautiful ending to that story. Elvis didn't die drugged and alone. He escaped, found God, and spent decades helping others. It's narrative repair through conspiracy. But there's a darker side to this persistent theory. Bob Joyce is a real person with a real life, a real congregation, and real feelings. He didn't ask to become the subject of a global conspiracy theory. He's repeatedly asked people to stop. He's explained that he's not Elvis, and yet the speculation continues, often accompanied by people showing up at his church, hoping to see the real king. One source described the situation as bordering on harassment. What started as an internet joke has real consequences for a private citizen who simply wants to pastor his flock in peace. This raises important questions about the ethics of viral speculation. When does harmless internet fun cross the line into causing real harm to real people? Elvis Presley officially died on August 16, 1977 in Memphis, Tennessee. His death was witnessed by medical personnel. His autopsy was conducted. His body was buried at Graceland, where his grave remains today. These are documented facts. They can be verified through multiple independent sources. The evidence for Elvis's death in 1977 is overwhelming and unambiguous. Bob Joyce has his own documented history. Birth records, school records, a ministry spanning decades, friends and family who've known him his entire life. He is his own person with his own story. The tragedy is that his actual life story, a man who found his calling in ministry, who uses his voice to serve others, is being overshadowed by a fantasy about someone else's life. So, what can we learn from the Bob Joyce case? First, understand that pareidolia is powerful. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines, and they'll find patterns whether they exist or not. When you notice physical or vocal similarities between people, remember that resemblance doesn't equal identity. Lots of people look and sound alike. It's a big world. Second, when someone explicitly denies a conspiracy about themselves, take that seriously. Bob Joyce has said, clearly and repeatedly, that he is not Elvis. That should mean something. Treating denial as evidence of guilt is a logical trap that makes any theory unfalsifiable. If proof against a theory becomes proof for it, you've left the realm of rational inquiry. Third, check basic facts before believing elaborate theories. Simple math often disproves complex conspiracies. A birth certificate showing 1954 versus 1935? That's a 19-year problem no theory can explain. Before sharing a viral claim, spend 30 seconds verifying it. Search for the subject's actual biography. Look for official records. The truth is usually easier to find than people assume. Fourth, Recognize that celebrity death conspiracies often stem from grief. The desire to believe a beloved figure is still alive somewhere is deeply human, but it's not healthy to nurture that fantasy. And finally, remember that viral theories have real targets. Bob Joyce is a person, not a meme. His congregation is a community, not a tourist attraction. Online speculation can become offline harassment. The internet has given us incredible tools for connection and discovery, but it's also given us the ability to harass private citizens based on nothing more than a resemblance and a viral video. Elvis Presley left behind an incredible legacy, music that changed the world, performances that defined an era, cultural influence that persists to this day. That's worth celebrating. Bob Joyce also has a legacy, decades of ministry, a community he's served, lives he's touched through his faith. That's also worth respecting on its own terms. If you've made it this far, you probably enjoy investigating viral claims and separating fact from fiction. If that's your thing, consider subscribing. We tackle stories like this every week. The Bob Joyce conspiracy isn't really about Bob Joyce, it's about our need to keep beloved figures alive, our pattern-seeking brains, and our willingness to believe compelling stories over boring facts. Elvis Presley died in 1977. Bob Joyce was born in 1954 and has been Bob Joyce his entire life. These are facts. And sometimes, facts are the most interesting story of all. I'm your host for Internet Mythbusters. Remember, the truth is out there. You just have to actually look for it. See you next time.